Yes. This one here? Yeah. Yeah, our final speaker for today is Mr. Sean Foche from CARICOM Impacts. He'll tell you about them, but it's the CARICOM Implementation Agency for Crime and Security. And he'll be coming to talk to us about CIRTS. We've heard about CIRTS. We've heard CIRTS mentioned today, but Sean, in his position there with CARICOM Impacts, is involved with Caribbean coordination of this whole CIRTS initiative. He has over 25 years of experience in the field of ICT, both private and public sector, and in other industries, including media, telecommunications, finance, health, education, security. And at present, he is, as IT manager for CARICOM Impacts, he is responsible for all ICT infrastructure at CARICOM Impacts headquarters, and he's also responsible for the technical components of the regional projects developed and implemented by that agency. So out of that, he is the lead on the cybersecurity and cybercrime initiatives being developed on behalf of CARICOM and by extension also the Caribbean countries. He has interfaced a lot with the CTU in collaborations between CARICOM Impacts and CTU in the sphere of cybersecurity. And he is well qualified actually to come and talk to us on this topic, and he will also make mention of the need for regional collaboration. This is a theme that the CTU has been harping on, not just in the matter of cybersecurity, but on a more wide basis, because as a means of overcoming our resource constraints, the resource constraints that exist in our individual jurisdictions. So on the topic of CIRTS and the need for regional collaboration, please welcome Mr. Sean Foche from CARICOM Impacts. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, somehow I get a sticky spot today. The last spot at the end of the day is normally the worst. First, let me say thanks to Nigel and to the CTU for having me here today. Let me also say thanks to the Belize Public Utilities for actually hosting the event. Today we want to look at the whole idea of CIRTS. This morning we've heard a whole ABC, so I just hope I don't add too many letters in terms of cybercrime, some of the issues to be dealt with. And for those of you who may be in the security realm, you'll know that everything is an acronym. So I hope I don't add too much. We want to look at CIRTS 101, just a general understanding of what are CIRTS, where we at, and where we hope to be. So in terms of the outline, I just want to go through a few slides in terms of what really is CARICOM Impact, just to give you an overview. We'll then look at the definition of CIRTS. We've realized that there have been a number of different, not really different, a number of varying definitions, all combining or looking at the same issues. We look at some of the requirements for developing the CIRTS, current status of CIRT development in the region, and we also talk about the way forward. Don't worry, you should be out of here soon. So CARICOM Impacts basically is the regional entity, it's a CARICOM established entity that looks at crime and security for the 15 member states and 5 associate states. What we basically do is look at crime and security initiatives that benefit the CARICOM region. We basically look at proposing those initiatives and actually implementing them. So just a little bit in terms of our structure. We are governed at the top by the Conference of Heads of Government. Under that, or representing us at that panel, will be the lead head of government responsible for crime and security, and right now that is the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Reporting to that will be the Council of Ministers responsible for law enforcement and security, which we call CONSLE. Okay? And obviously there's a chair of CONSLE that actually chairs that grouping. Advising is what we call, we have 5 standing committees. The standing committees are the Standing Committee of Commissioners of Police, Chief of Military, Chief of Immigration, Chief of Customs, and then there is a Standing Committee of Heads of Intelligence and Financial Investigation Units. Recently, we've actually added a 6th Standing Committee, which will be the Heads of Prisons and Correctional Facilities. We work very closely with 2 other regional agencies, that being the RSS, which is the Regional Security Services, and CIDEMA, which is the Caribbean Disaster and Emergency Management Authority. So that gives you an idea in terms of how we structure. And what is the main strength is that we actually liaise with all the heads of security. And that gives us a little impetus in terms of getting stuff done. So, in terms of the actual structure, we have CARICOM impacts at the head, and then we have 2 sub-agencies, the JRCC, the Joint Regional Communication Center, and there is also the RIFC, which is the Regional Intelligence Fusion Center. So headquarters is basically responsible for providing oversight and coordination and implementation of projects, and we also do a number of capacity building initiatives. The Joint Regional Communication Center, located in Barbados, is actually a 24/7 operation responsible for passenger profiling, cargo profiling, immigration and customs support, and also information sharing. They also do a number of capacity building initiatives out of there, but their focus is basically on border security. So for those of us who travel from other countries to here, before you even land, the Belize government would know exactly who is landing, if there's any persons of interest or anything like that. That's basically what they do. Then there's the RIFC. And the RIFC, another 24-hour operation, responsible for strategic assessments, threat analysis, intelligence sharing and cooperation, and also capacity building. They are basically manned by staff from the region, which are military or any form of security, and they actually come to the agency for 2 years on what we call a secondment arrangement. So that in itself builds capacity, because they come, they work for 2 years, understand the whole idea of regional intelligence, and then they go back and somebody else new come, so you get that rotation. That way we also try to build on the intelligence gathering skills within the member states. So let's talk a little bit about the internet. We've been talking this morning, and everybody have gone across this before. Really and truly is the most powerful and live and widely available communication media on earth. Our reliance is significantly increasing. And even from us as Caribbean people, we talked a lot this morning. The first question was like, how many of you checked your email before you left your room this morning? Okay? Our reliance continues to increase. And the strange thing is that it is so easy and cheap to access, but the security behind it nobody really pays attention to. Because really and truly, if you think about it, securing it may be actually more expensive than using it. But then we have a freeness mentality. If it's free to use, who cares about the security? Okay? So as a result, one has to understand that with the use of the internet, there comes a time when we need to wake up and understand what is the security mechanisms behind it. So many internet systems are not securely configured. Okay? The questions for the day we've been hearing: who's really responsible? We talk about the RN spoke this morning. My colleague from ICANN also spoke. But the whole question and issues of security continue to plague us. We want to talk about CIRTS, and I know that you've heard the term this morning. Let's understand too that there are varying ways of spelling this whole idea of CIRTS. So we have CIRT, which talks about Computer Incident Response Team. We have CERT, which is Computer Emergency Readiness or Response Teams. We have CIRTS, Computer Security Incident Response Teams. Generally, let's look at some of the definitions. A carefully selected a well-trained group of people whose purpose is to promptly and correctly handle an incident so that it can quickly be contained, investigated, and recovered from. It is usually comprised of members of within the company, and there may be people that there must be people who could actually drop what they're doing and respond immediately. Now, we see that as the general definition. If you go through all the definitions, you'll see the basic concept. People who could deal with issues or deal with an emergency should something arise. And I think we've kind of moved away from the emergency to deal with it as incidents, because if an incident is properly handled, then it does not necessarily become an emergency. So we kind of started to get a bit more proactive. Okay? We see a few more definitions. Okay? The second one there says a computer security incident response team, an organization that receives reports of security breaches, conducts analysis of the report, and responds to the sender. So basically we're saying that it is about teams that respond. Think about it. Do we then within the region have to create these teams? Who would make these teams up? How would they respond? Who would fund these teams? Who do they respond to? A number of questions then arise. According to the best practices produced and established, we realize that whether you call it CIRT, CERT, SCEIRT, all of them basically talk about the same thing. But what we now start to do is to try to look at being a little bit more proactive and start to involve things like awareness and things like training, so that we no longer wait for the incident to happen or wait for the incident to actually become an emergency, but try to deal with it even beforehand. Then, obviously, if we talk about CIRTS, we cannot forget the institution of FIRST. And FIRST was one of those who actually come up with the idea that, listen, while CIRTS may be developed, and there's a need for them, yes, but there's also a need to have the CIRTS collaborating and talking to each other. Because from the time an incident happens in one place, possibility exists that it's going to affect other locations. I always say that cybercrime is one form of crime where the perpetrator does not have to be present at the location to commit the crime. That being said, there's also a concern as to where is the perpetrator actually apprehended, if he is, and where is he tried, if he is. So first, however, another proactive approach is about bringing CIRTS together and helping CIRTS to start to communicate and collaborate and share information and share advice and start to learn from each other, so that way we are able to actually we are actually able to be more proactive to deal with issues before they actually turn into emergencies. I came across this really nice analogy out of the Carnegie Mellon University, and this morning somebody actually used another analogy out of one of their studies with the Coke machine. And what they basically say is that a CIRTS is like a fire department. When you call them, you expect to get a response, even if they don't come to your doorstep. But whether it be a phone call, an email, kind of walk you through a process and that kind of thing, that's important. But let's understand, fire departments don't just deal with fires when they happen. What about prevention? What about training? What about awareness? In Trinidad many years ago, there was some serious issues in terms of crime. And at one time, they used to say when you call the police station, they'll tell you they have no vehicles to come. And then they bought a set of vehicles, and when you call the police station, they'll tell you, well, you have vehicles, but you don't have drivers. That has now changed. Similarly, the thing with CIRTS is that while they are very similar to fire departments, how would you feel if you call a CIRT to try to get response, but nothing happens? Is the CIRT really in place to do what it's supposed to do? So it's not just about setting up CIRTS, but we need to be able to set up all the infrastructure, all the quote-unquote, we hear the term used this morning, the ecosystem around the CIRTS to allow it to function. So, we realize that the fire department don't just come and out the fire, but they actually add a little bit more. They do things like contribute to the actual development of laws, policies, procedures. They do some awareness, they do some training, all in an attempt to try to mitigate any possible instances. So the more we can be more proactive, it means then that there is less attempt for things to actually happen. So, that being said, let's talk about the types of CIRTS. CIRTS may be categorized based on their function or based on who actually set them or pointing like that. We talk about academic CIRTS, developed a lot by universities. We talk about critical infrastructure CIRTS. We also talk about military CIRTS, commercial, government, and let's talk national. From a national perspective, there is certainly a need for us to develop CIRTS within the region. To look at our internet traffic, as we continue to use the internet more and more, we talked this morning about the GDP that is being lost through cybercrime. So that being the case, clearly there is a need to actually increase the development of CIRTS in the region. Okay. I think just give me 1 sec. Just gonna give them 1 sec to sort this out.
It look like you're losing 5-5.
Okay, so as we talked about it, just as there's a need to construct your fire stations and to have your fire stations operating properly, there's also a need to develop these national CIRTS. From a national perspective, because we realize that the internet is important to us from a national perspective to ensure our economic viability, to ensure our communication, just the same way it's important then to develop these national CIRTS that will basically add to confidence building and to actually add to the capacity building of our member states. They will have to coordinate incident response at the national level and also liaise with some international players. It will help the country's government networks and critical infrastructures. So at the end of the day, there is a need for the development of national CIRTS. But then we ask ourselves, what is really important? Setting up a national CIRT is not a, well, you hire 2 people, put them in an office and tell them, well, that's your job. It's very much like doing a startup business or doing some kind of strategic plan for an organization. You have to identify what really is your vision for the CIRT. What do you really hope to achieve? What is the mission? How are you going to get there? What are you going to do to make this vision a reality? What is your scope? How broad is this CIRT going to be? What services you're going to offer? What time frame you're going to look at? And possibly in terms of time frame for services, if it is that you're going to start small and build it out as you grow. More than anything else, there's the legal framework. You must have a legal framework that will allow the CIRT to have some kind of quote-unquote teeth. Because if it is that it's not going to have any effect on the national community, then really and truly, you're just wasting resources. The human resource requirements are not only about finding the correct people and hiring them, but continuous development and training. Because as we know, internet, cybercrime continues to expand exponentially. We also talk about things like the infrastructure to be in place, the hardware, the software, the technical procedures. And then there's the standard operating procedures in terms of the actual collaboration. You want to talk to 2 or 3 CIRTs. How do you share the information? What information is shared? What kind of operating procedures or policies are we going to use? And these actually came out of the best practices for establishing of national CIRTs, which was published this year, 2016, by the OAS. And let me say that a lot of the material actually came from this publication and from some other publications, which I'll actually highlight. Okay. Some of the services, I think we kind of lost. Yes. So in terms of some of the services provided, your post-response services will be things like looking at alerts and warnings and incident handling, vulnerability handling. But then we kind of move a bit more into the pre-response type services, looking at announcements, the technology trends and surveys. We also talk about quality assurance services, things like risk analysis, security audits and screening, security consulting, the whole education and training aspect. So we see here that the services being offered continue to increase, and focus is basically more looking at those services that build capacity, those services that are more preventative, those services that are more proactive. In terms of our current state of development, well, as we said, the absence of institutional structures to deal with cyber incidents and attack is a genuine problem in responding to cyber threats, particularly within the region. So agencies such as the ITU and OAS particularly have been working with member states to actually set up CIRTS. According to the ITU, there are 102 national CIRTs around the world, about 10 Caribbean countries were actually did assessments on in terms of their ability or having the resources to actually set up a CIRTS. And out of those 10, only 3, and I would beg to actually just update that I actually got some additional information there, that Bahamas also has a CIRTS. So the CIRTS that are actually in operation are Jamaica, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago and Bahamas. Jamaica is in process, and Suriname is also in process. So, that being the case, we have 15 CARICOM member states with 5 associate states, but we basically have about 4 CIRTS. Something is wrong. How do we leapfrog? How do we then move this forward? Because we understand that there is a capacity shortage. So, in terms of the way forward, coming out of the last CSM2, which was your Caribbean Stakeholders Region 2 that would have been May or March this year in St. Lucia, we actually developed a CARICOM cybersecurity and cybercrime plan. And that was actually done in coordination with CARICOM Impacts, the CTU, OAS, and Commonwealth Secretariat. Some of the areas to be addressed within that plan is about the establishment of a regional cyber committee, which would be based on representation from each member state, having a cyber point of contact in each member state, or more so a cyber crime contact. We'd also look to do some updates in terms of getting a fair idea of what is happening in each country. There have been a number of assessments done, but as we said, time after time, member states are doing what they could do, and therefore there's a need to continuously have an update to know where member states are at. We also want to identify some minimum standards. And let's understand something. For each member state, we are at totally different perspectives. What you in your own member state think as normal, trust me, it isn't. We talked this morning about what is broadband, and is 512 really broadband? I remember in 2009, Impacts did, we were upgrading the advanced passenger information system. And I personally visited some member states, and this system was still running on dial-up. And I was in awe. I was like, dial-up? Oh, and that wasn't bad. The dial-up was actually being shared with 3 or 4 systems. That was in 2009. Trust me, what we take for granted is not necessarily reality for some member states. Let's also understand we have a culture of, it's not a problem until it affects us. So, how many member state governments actually see cybercrime as an issue? But until it actually hits home, until something major happens to your country, then it becomes an issue. And then again, we continue to have a reactive type approach. So, the action plan actually speaks to the identification of some common needs, some solutions, and we try to identify some agencies or partners who are going to work on these specific issues. And then, last but by no means least, is about monitoring and evaluation of the activities to ensure that the objectives are actually being achieved. So the plan actually identified 5 major areas of need. Public awareness, building sustainable capacity, because we understand that capacity is also a main area. Technical standards and infrastructure, the legal environment, and then regional, international cooperation and collaboration. And that is going to be dealt with from the perspective of incident response, cybercrime investigations, and also capacity building. So, in terms of that last item, what we've identified is that there's a need to establish computer emergency incident response teams at the national level. But in order to do that, as we said before, there is a significant need for capacity building. So what we're looking to do is also look at a regional perspective and the establishment of a regional capacity center for cybersecurity and incident response. So that way we use the regional center to build the required capacities, while we continue to urge the national entities to actually set up their actual CIRTS. Collaboration among the CIRTS is going to be important. Connection to other international entities is also going to be important. So in order to establish that, what we're looking to do is to use the sub-agency, the Regional Intelligence Fusion Center, because they are involved in a number of strategic intelligence issues. So you're going to use that center, use the whole structure of the secondment officers, so we pull individuals from the member states with that cybersecurity background to build some capacity, and then we do a number of trainings, and the trainings will happen either through specific cybercrime and cybercrime intelligence training, or even including cybercrime as part of the normal intelligence training that they go through. That being said, one of the other issues that we hope to address is to be able to use the data that is pulled from this center to actually amalgamate it into our other intelligence products. Because clearly there is a link between cybercrime and things like money laundering, transnational crime, for example, things like movement of guns and arms and ammunition, and the whole movements of people and the people trade. Those are some of the other main issues, or what we would call significant threats to the region that we are seeing happening. And we are sure that there's a link between all these transnational issues. So rather than create a new agency, we know that the region cannot support a new agency. A number of the CARICOM regional agencies are already strapped in terms of resources, in terms of being funded, and therefore the proposal is to use what exists and build the capacity. That being said, we'll be able to build the capacity from a regional perspective. We'll be able to coordinate among the existing CIRTS, and for those who don't have a CIRT, we'll be able to provide services to them until we could bring them to the point where they actually develop their national CIRTs. Questions? Was I that thorough? I really just want to go quick.
Well, being up at the front here, I'll ask the first one. In terms of the national CIRTs, the ones that are operating, could you tell me or say a bit more about them in terms of how are they constituted, who are the, which agencies involved there, and I'm especially interested in knowing the extent of private sector type participation or cooperation with that effort.